In this video, we're going to take a look at sales data and trends for Amazing Fantasy 15 and Ultimate Fallout 4, the 1-25 Djurdjevic variant, and talk about the market in general. Are we heading for a crash? Is there a huge opportunity available? And there's some really helpful tips that I think will help make you a better collector and investor. Stay tuned.
Bry's Comics.
First up, we have a giveaway announcement. Congratulations to Jody Hickerson. You won the YouTube giveaway for June. And congratulations to David Kochmar. You won the giveaway for Bry's Comics newsletter at bryscomics.com. And this month, we have some awesome giveaways. If you subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video, you're entered to win Invincible Iron Man #7, the first cameo appearance of Riri Williams, and a 9.8. And if you sign up for the newsletter at bryscomics.com, you'll get exclusive access to new collections and discount codes, and it'll also enter you to win Doctor Doom #1, the 1 in 50 Adam Kubert cover, first solo series for Doctor Doom, in a 9.8. Now, I want to start this video by saying that Amazing Fantasy 15 is actually a book that I am targeting. I have decided that that is the most important comic book to me in the world. First appearance of Spider-Man, and I know I'm not alone. I know that this is the mega grail for many, many people, and for a lot of us, it has went completely out of reach in recent years. And so I want to preface this video by saying that I do intend to buy this book at some point, and I think there is some great data here that will help a lot of us that are in that boat. And even if these prices are completely out of your range, the principles that we're going to discuss in here apply to almost all comic books. And each one has a little bit of nuance, but there is definitely lessons to be learned here for every price point in the comic book market. And before we jump into the numbers for AF15, I want to start by saying that AF15 is kind of a unique situation because we saw the ultimate combination, the perfect storm of market conditions to cause that book to absolutely skyrocket. And then we saw the complete opposite, the perfect storm of market conditions to cause it to either crash or correct. And it's important that we distinguish those two terms because they get thrown around a lot, and it just depends on who's saying it and what they mean. And for me personally, when I say comic book market boom, I'm talking about 2020 to 2021, where almost all comics across the board saw like a 200 to 300% increase. That's what I mean when I say comic book boom. And when I say correction, I'm talking about when a book falls off of those highs about 20 to 30%. To me, that's a correction. And then anything over 50% to me is a crash. So somewhere in between 30 and 50%, it's somewhere between a correction and a crash. But in my opinion, anything that has corrected 50% off of the highs has officially crashed. It's just semantics. It's just terminology. Don't get hung up on the terms. So let's jump into the computer and take a look at sales data for Amazing Fantasy 15. All right, so here we are on gpanalysis.com to look at Amazing Fantasy 15. But before we jump into the numbers, I wanted to start with the census. And here on the census, we can see that there's 2,332 universal blue labels. There's a whole bunch of qualified and restored labels as well. 3,600 total copies on the census. So this book isn't rare. I mean, you can't say that Amazing Fantasy 15 is a rare book, but what is going on with it is that it's such a major grail. It's such an important key. It's such a highly coveted book that even though we have large numbers on the census, the numbers that come to market are just a fraction of what's actually available. But what we're seeing now is that even when the number that come to market is slightly increased, it has a drastic impact on the prices. And we'll see that here in just a second on the census. We're only going to look at sales from June or July of 2022. This video is being filmed on July 5th, 2022. So here, the most recent highest grade copy to sell is an 8.0 that sold for $448,000, down from $520,000 just 3 months ago. So this is more like correction zone, 10 to 20% decrease. I would call that a correction. And here we get down to the 7.5. 2 sales so far this year, in April for $300,000 and most recent for $216,000. So this, in my opinion, is still correction zone. I mean, it's about 30% decrease, which in my opinion could be considered a correction. But if we look at the quantity of number of copies sold. There was 2 copies sold so far this year. Last year in 2021, when we had the big run up in prices, there was only 1 copy sold. So far in June, we've already doubled the number of copies that have come up for sale. And I think that's a big factor in this coming down in price so much, amongst other things. There's a lot of market conditions that are affecting this. And one of them is the quantity of available copies for sale. And then we come down here to 7.0. There's 4 sales so far this year, which is already more than the total of 2021, and we're only in June. And if we look at the prices here, we can see pretty much a steady trend downward: 252, 222, 240, 168. And if you look at these numbers between 168 and 252, that is breaching the crash territory. I mean, it's kind of leaving correction territory and going down to crash territory. I think once you get to 50% of value, I think that's technically a crash, in my opinion. And then here we have a 6.5, 3 copies sold this year, 0 copies sold in 2021, 1 copy sold in 2022. So we've already tripled the number of copies sold in the last 2 years, and 2 of them were in the month of June. So this just goes to show you, the quantity of copies available for sale is just flooding the market all at once. And it's reflected here in the price. It went from 225 to 180 to 120. And this is absolutely crash territory. I mean, when a book comes down $105,000, almost 50% in just 3 months, in my opinion, that's technically a crash. And then here we have the 5.5, 5 copies sold so far this year. Only 2 copies sold in 2021, so more than double already, and we're only in the month of June. And here you can see that reflected in the prices. I think we're approaching crash territory for the 5.5, 120, 114, 102, 117, down to 75,000. And the biggest, difference in prices here is happening in May and June. And then if we look at the 5.0, we have 6 copies sold so far this year compared to 1 copy in 2021. So already 6 times the number of copies sold, and we're all only in June. And look at this, 4 of them were in June. And, that's reflected in the price. This $100,000 sale is a total anomaly. I mean, there was higher grade copies that sold for a fraction of that, so I'm not sure what's going on with this. Maybe it was a really good crack press candidate, but who knows? I can't click on it to see the actual item. So that's just kind of an outlier here, but it went from 78 to 84 to 78 to 63 to 49. So if you look at 78 to 49, I mean, we've got a big spread on this, but we're approaching that crash territory for the 5.0. For the 4.0, we have 4 sales, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. From the 4.0 and below, we see kind of a difference in the numbers here. In 2021, there was 8 copies of a 4.0 that sold. This is the first time that we're seeing less copies sold so far this year compared to 2021. And if you look at the prices, 72 to 57 to 52 to 52, definitely more stability here in these last few months. And it almost appears that this book is leveling off in the 4.0 range. Then we go down to the 3.0 range, and we have 8 copies sold this year, but also 8 copies sold in 2021. So we're on par with that. We're only halfway through the year, though. And looking at the number of copies that are coming up each month, it seems like we're going to get way more copies sold in 2022. And if we look at the numbers here, they're more bunched together. They're more like 48, 39, 44, 37, 48, 47, 45. I mean, the fact that all of these are kind of tightly bunched together, if you look at the graph here, I mean, it is definitely less volatility here in the 3.0. And if we look at the 2.5, we had a kind of an anomaly high of $52,000. That's a really high price for a 2.5. I mean, even if you look, the 3.0 never went that high. In this one, if we just kind of remove the anomaly, it went from 45 to 42 to 34 to 37. These are just kind of more bunched together. And if we were to take that high price sale out, it would be more leveled off. What I think can explain this is that in these lower grades, the 2.5, the 3.0, the 4.0, you have collectors that are in the market to buy these. And when you get to those high price numbers, I mean, what collector do you know that can pay $450,000 for a comic? I mean, there's probably a handful of them in the entire world. And so when you get up into these numbers, you're looking at investors. And so the investors are withdrawing from the market. That's my hypothesis, at least. And then down in the lower grades and the 2.5s and stuff, I mean, how many collectors have you seen YouTube videos of recently where they're finally, unboxing their Grail and it's an AF-15 and it's somewhere in the 2.5 or below? I mean, I would fall into that category as well. I'm sure, I might even have a video like that soon where I take advantage of this price dip. So I think in these lower grades, it's collectors. Let's get into the lessons that I think can be gleaned from this. So there you have the sales data, and I want to talk about the perfect storm. What caused these books, the Amazing Fantasy 15, to just skyrocket so high in price? And essentially, the dumbed down 30-second version is we had the pandemic hit. We had stimulus money being flooded into the market, all kinds of government funding money, causing the economy overall to just boom artificially. People are stuck at home and have nothing better to do than look at comic books and bid and buy them on comic book auctions. We have a whole bunch of new collectors into the hobbies. Cons went dark, which meant that all sales were happening online, and a lot of times people would buy these grails at cons and the sales data wouldn't be available, so it was all happening online. And in addition to all of that, we had the Spider-Man movie, which was, in my opinion, the biggest, most hyped movie in the history of comic book movies, and it paid off. That movie delivered. Everybody loved it, and prices continued to go up even after the movie, which is really rare in the comic book market. And the biggest factor to cause Amazing Fantasy 15 to spike the way that it did, in my opinion, is the uncertainty in the stock market had a lot of people pulling out of the stock market in 2020, 2021. They saw this golden opportunity in collectibles, in Amazing Fantasy 15 in particular, and they parked a whole bunch of money, causing this artificial spike and increase in these values for AF-15 at auction houses. So there were investors buying these comics, not collectors. People that had no intention of ever keeping Amazing Fantasy 15. They just saw an opportunity and they wanted to capitalize on it. All of those things combined caused Amazing Fantasy 15 to hit astounding heights. Fast forward to today, and I think we have the exact opposite of that perfect storm. We have stimulus money is completely dried up. The biggest factor causing the perfect storm of the decline in prices is that I believe those investors have withdrawn from the market. I believe that they're looking at the sales and they're saying, okay, the party's over. Amazing Fantasy 15, there is no way we're going to buy it today for $400,000 and flip it tomorrow for $600,000. The party's over. The good times are gone, and they're just completely withdrawn from the market, which means that there's less buyers for these books, especially at these higher dollar amounts. It's back down to the collectors, and that is going to cause trickle-down effects for all the rest of the grades. It's these no longer these record-breaking highs, breaking news, making YouTube videos, causing all of this hype for the book. That's going away, and that's going to have trickle-down effect on all of the grades. In addition to that, just regular inflation, the economy in general. I mean, everybody's talking about inflation. Everybody's talking about the uncertainty in the economy. And you throw on top of that the fact that we're into the summer month and the natural cycles of comic books in summer months is to go down. All of those things combined is the perfect storm to cause this book to correct or crash in a major way. So the biggest problem with the current situation that we're seeing with the comic book market and seeing prices either correct or crash for a lot of books is that nobody knows where the bottom is going to be, obviously. And trying to catch the bottom is a really tricky thing. I believe going forward that we're going to see some amazing opportunities. I think that the market actually might overcorrect in the coming months, and I think that we might see opportunities to pick up keys that rarely come to market, and there might be some really good opportunities to pick up those grails that are going to go back into hiding for years until we see another market explosion and run up. So these are exciting times. I think there is going to be some incredible opportunities, and nobody knows where the bottom is going to be. It could be tomorrow. It could be next week. It could be 6 months from now, and it's really hard to tell where the bottom is going to be for this. Leave a note in the comments on what you think. Do you think we're 6 months out from the bottom? Do you think we're at the bottom today? I'd really love to hear from you guys about your thoughts. So what can we glean from this? What can we learn from this going forward? Well, the first and foremost, the most important lesson, and this applies to, all kinds of investments, not just comic books, is supply and demand. But it's important to familiarize yourself with how supply and demand works for comic books, because you'll see these trends and opportunities all over the place if you just understand supply and demand. And one of the things that's important to get, data on supply and demand is to get a membership to sites like gpanalysis.com, where you can see the data collected all right there in one place, and also to have access to the CGC census. And you combine those two things, the numbers of sales that are happening, the numbers that are on the census, combine that with market conditions and think, okay, right now there's 2,000 copies of this book in the 9.8, but I'm only seeing one copy available on eBay, and it's this high price. Why would that be? Well, there's all of this hype. People are holding on to it. They think that they can get more for it in the future, and that's actually going to cause the price to go up when the supply is low. But what's going to happen when all of those copies that are on the census, people are holding and just waiting and biding their time? What's going to happen when those copies hit the market? Well, the price is going to come crashing down. So understanding the nuance to each key, because it's different for each key, the timing is different, but the principles are the same, and they're pretty simple to understand if you start to familiarize yourself with it. Let's do a real life example of supply and demand. Almost the exact same thing, I believe, that happened with AF-15 is going to happen with Ultimate Fallout 4, the 1 in 25 Djurjevic variant. Let's jump into the computer and look at the data. All right, so here we are in the census for Ultimate Fallout 4, the 1 in 25 Djurjevic variant. There's 157 9.8s, 22 signature series for 180 total 9.8s, almost 800 total copies on the census, compared to 14,000 copies now on the census for the first prints, 3,600 9.8s in the first prints. But check this out. Look at the Pekeli variant, the second print, the least valuable of all the Ultimate Fallout 4s, and it's the most rare, 949 9.8s. This is the one with his face on the cover. Compared to the regular second print, there's 1,900 total 9.8s. So almost double the amount of the regular second prints compared to the Pekeli variant. And this just goes to show, a cover sells a comic. People don't really look into these numbers. People that are buying this comic aren't looking to see which one is more rare and making an educated guess. They just want the one that they recognize and see and like. So anyways, it is what it is. But if you come over here and look at the sales for Ultimate Fallout for the Djurjevic variant, it has just completely skyrocketed. Most recent sale, $40,800. And if you look at the total copies sold, all right, 2019, 23 copies sold. People are like, holy smokes, I can get $3,000 for this book that I paid $100 for. That's what's going on in 2019. And then in 2020, people are like, holy smokes, I can get $9,000 for this book that I paid $3,000 for. And then they're like, well, wait a minute. I can get $9,000 for this. What happens if I hold? And then you go into 2021, even less copies sold, and people are like, whoa, I can get $30,000 for this comic that I spent $12,000 on. And then you have 2022, 2 copies sold. $40,000 most recent sale. This is simple supply and demand. And my thought on this is, if you paid anywhere near $3,000, see right here in 2020, it was $3,500 book to, later in 2020, it was a $9,000 book. If you paid anywhere between $3,000 and $9,000 for this book, it's currently worth $40,000. You have the intention to flip it and you're still holding, I think you're greedy. If you paid $9,000 and you're not happy with $40,000. And what's going to happen is this is just Amazing Fantasy 15 all over again. All of these copies are going to come to market all at once, and this price is going to come crashing down. There is no way this book can sustain a $40,000 price if more copies come to market. The only reason it went this high is because it's supply and demand. Everybody wants it, and there's only 2 copies available. So I hope that it doesn't come off as condescending. I'm not trying to say if you're holding Ultimate Fallout 4, the 1 in 25, that you're greedy in a negative way. I just want it to kind of be, you're a subscriber or you're at least viewing my channel, and I want you to make the wisest decisions possible and maybe have a little bit of a different perspective, like, wait, what am I waiting for? This illustrates a very, very important principle that Warren Buffett is famous for stating, and he says, when others are being fearful, you should be greedy. And when others are being greedy, you should be fearful. So that means that Ultimate Fallout 4, 1 in 25, there's only 2 copies available. That means people are being greedy. Therefore, if you're a buyer, you should be fearful. You should be like, maybe now's not the best time to buy. On the flip side, when people are being fearful and say a dozen copies of Ultimate Fallout 4, 1 in 25 come to the same auction, which we actually saw with Amazing Fantasy 15, that means people are being fearful and they're flooding the market and trying to cash out all at the same time. If people are being fearful, maybe you should be a little greedy, and that's a good time to pick it up. I'm not trying to be condescending and saying with using the word greedy. I just think that if you're holding with the intent to sell, you should sell. And if you have the intent to buy, you should wait. And again, this is very different and very nuanced for each and every different key. There's so much that goes into it, but these are some really valuable principles that can be applied to a lot of different purchases and investments with comic books. I hope that this video was helpful. If it was, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It'll enter you to win Invincible Iron Man #7, the first cameo appearance of Riri Williams. And if you head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter, you get first access to a bunch of new key books, discount codes. You'll also be entered to win Dr. Doom #1, the 1 in 50 Adam Kubert cover. Thank you, as always, for sticking with me to the end of the video. These are exciting times, folks. This is a potentially amazing opportunities that we might not see again. Don't let this fear, stop you from enjoying this hobby and collecting what you love. Thank you once again for sticking with me to the end, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye.
Bryce Comics.